5:14 local time, the northern edge of the Strait of Hormuz. The first warning of the coming war does not arrive from the horizon. It does not come with the sound of incoming fire or the sight of smoke on the water. It comes from the cold, sterile glow of a tactical display deep inside the Combat Information Center of a United States Navy guided missile cruiser. A surface warfare operator, 22 years old and running on 3 hours of sleep and black coffee, leans forward. The ambient blue light of the console reflects in his eyes as 4 new jagged tracks flash into existence on the screen. Fast, low, closing from the north-northeast coastline. For exactly half a second, the room is absolutely silent. Nobody speaks, nobody breathes. Then the entire nervous system of the strike group snaps awake. Multiple inbound contacts bearing 038, speed high, altitude low, vampire, vampire, vampire. On the flag bridge of the 100,000-ton Nimitz-class aircraft carrier at the center of the formation, the steel deck beneath every combat boot still feels entirely steady, controlled, ordinary. The ship is holding her course through the narrowest, most dangerous maritime chokepoint on the planet. She is moving in a perfectly engineered tactical geometry, escorted by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers stationed forward and aft, with a Ticonderoga-class cruiser offset to port. The entire battle group is moving through the black water with the quiet, terrifying discipline of an apex predator built to survive bad ideas and punish them with overwhelming violence. The sea is flat, black glass, just beginning to reflect the pale, bruised purple of first light. Then the carrier's internal circuit breaks the calm. The collision alarm sounds first, a deep, bone-rattling klaxon that vibrates through the bulkheads, through the soles of the sailors' boots, right into their teeth. Then comes the voice over the 1MC, stripping away any illusion of peace. General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. Up and forward to starboard, down and aft to port. Reason for general quarters is inbound surface-to-surface missiles. There is no buildup, there is no confusion, there is only steel, alarms, and sudden violent motion. Below decks, deep in the maze of passageways, 5,000 sailors move with explosive speed. They do not run blindly, they flow. They slam heavy watertight hatches shut, spinning the iron dogs down tight to seal the ship into isolated blast-proof compartments. Damage control lockers are thrown open, flash gear, fire hoses, and breathing apparatus are dragged into the passageways. On the 4.5-acre flight deck, the wind is howling. Yellow-shirted directors and brown-shirted plane captains turn as one toward the towering island superstructure as the warning rolls across the loudspeakers. A pair of FA-18 Super Hornets, still chained to the deck after the night's final recovery cycle, sit motionless under the dim, eerie wash of the red deck lighting. Nearby ordnance crews drop what they are holding, listen to the sky for 1 single second, and then break into a dead sprint. Nobody wastes a heartbeat asking what this means. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical picture sharpens into a nightmare. The Aegis combat system is doing what it was designed to do at the height of the Cold War. It is talking to every ship in the fleet, fusing their radars into one godlike view of the battle space. The cruiser to port confirms the exact same tracks. Seconds later, the forward-screening destroyer reports identical radar returns. That kills any lingering, desperate hope of sensor clutter, atmospheric ghosting, or system noise. 3 ships, 1 perfectly synchronized picture. The contacts are absolutely real. Their flight profile is unmistakably consistent with anti-ship sea-skimming cruise missiles. That realization lands hard. The carrier strike group is not drifting through the vast, forgiving expanse of the open Pacific Ocean. It is trapped in a knife fight in a phone booth. It is moving through a waterway so narrow that reaction time is compressed into nothing, where every jagged inlet, every commercial dhow, and every inch of coastline can hide a mobile launcher. There is no room here for indecision. There is no time to consult Washington. The tactical action officer steps closer to the master display, his voice devoid of panic, stripped down to pure operational ice. Time to outer engagement window? Under 2 minutes. On the navigation bridge, the strike group commander does not raise his voice. He looks out through the reinforced blast windows at the pitch-black horizon, then glances down at the repeater feed. Set condition 1. Weapons free on confirmed hostile tracks. The order is passed through the encrypted data links. On the destroyer screening 10 miles ahead of the carrier, the vertical launch system cells are already receiving targeting data. Deep in the destroyer's hull, massive steel hatches snap open, exposing the tips of the interceptor missiles to the morning air. The defensive layers begin to form automatically. Outer layer first, then middle, then point defense if anything leaks through. Nobody is improvising. Every sailor, every pilot, every radar operator has run this exact scenario in simulators 1,000 times, drilling until the apocalypse became muscle memory. Miles above the formation, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft banks into a tight orbit. Its massive rotating radome slices through the thin air, pushing vast amounts of fresh, high-resolution targeting data down into the fleet's network. The airborne radar sees what the surface ships cannot yet see over the curvature of the Earth. The Hawkeye adds something infinitely worse to the picture. 2 smaller radar contacts, higher, slower, trailing just behind the fast movers, possible decoys, possible kamikaze drones. Either way, this is no longer a rogue commander taking a single blind shot from the shore. This is a highly coordinated multi-axis saturation attack package designed to overwhelm the computers, deplete the magazines, and put an American carrier on the bottom of the ocean. On the flight deck, an aviation boatswain's mate looks up as the very first faint glowing streak appears far off the bow. It is almost too low to separate from the dark horizon. He does not hear the roar of the missile's turbofan engine yet. He only sees a wicked, unnatural motion where there should be absolutely nothing but the dawn. Up on the island superstructure, high-powered optical lenses and infrared cameras swing violently toward the threat axis, locking onto the heat blooms. Every fraction of a second is now being measured, logged, and spoken aloud somewhere in the battle group. Contacts holding course. Range decreasing. No identification, friend or foe squawk. Hostile declared. The first interceptor assignment flashes across the tactical network. Forward screen destroyer. Standard missile 2 selected. In CIC, nobody cheers. Nobody smiles. An assigned missile on a computer screen is not a kill. It is simply the very next step between survival and a catastrophic hull breach. The carrier keeps moving. That detail matters immensely. There is no wild evasive turn. There is no panic in the wake. The escorts tighten their geometry, shrinking the defensive bubble to shield the high-value unit in the center. At the exact same time, the electronic warfare suites on every ship roar to life. They begin flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with blinding energy, hunting for the enemy missile's seeker heads, blasting the airwaves with jamming frequencies to confuse the incoming radar. Somewhere on the starboard side of the carrier, the massive white dome of a phalanx close-in weapon system pivots. The multi-barrel Gatling gun whirs as it slews a few deliberate degrees toward the inbound axis. It doesn't move enough to dramatize the moment, just enough to show the crew that the machine is awake, tracking, and waiting for its turn to kill. Then, one of the inbound tracks drops radically. A watchstander calls it out quietly, but the words hit like a physical blow. Sea skimmer just broke below the clutter line. The missile has dove to mere feet above the wave tops, trying to vanish into the surface clutter, using the swells of the ocean to hide from the Aegis radar. On the bridge, the captain keeps his eyes locked forward, hands gripping the rail. Deep in the CIC, the weapons control officer does not hesitate for a fraction of a second. Engage. Miles ahead of the mighty carrier, the lead destroyer's forward deck erupts. A massive column of blinding white fire tears a hole in the morning darkness. An SM-2 interceptor punches into the sky with a concussive roar that shakes the water itself. It climbs hard and steep, a jagged spear of pure kinetic energy, burning a temporary sun into the gloom before it rolls over and arcs downward, driving back toward the surface of the sea to meet the incoming threat. On the carrier's flight deck, heads turn instinctively toward the flash. On the radar displays in the combat center, the geometry collapses. 2 digital symbols, one outbound, one inbound, closing at a combined speed of over Mach 4 on a point in empty space where someone is about to lose. Behind that first hostile track, the remaining missiles are still tearing across the water. The American interceptor reaches the terminal phase of its flight. In the CIC, nobody blinks. One heartbeat later, the first hostile track simply ceases to exist on the screen. Splash 1. There is no cheer. There is no sigh of relief. There is only the ruthless calculation of the next threat. 3 more inbound. 2 high contacts still trailing. The kill buys the strike group perhaps 10 seconds of time, not safety. Ahead of the carrier, the screening destroyer stays absolutely locked on the threat axis, its SPY-1 radar pouring an unfathomable amount of fire control data into the network. To port, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser picks up the second sea-skimming missile as it slides in low over the strait. The enemy weapon is using the curvature of the Earth and the heavy atmospheric clutter of the dawn to stay hidden. It is moving at over 600 miles per hour. Fast enough to snap the spine of a warship, low enough to arrive almost unannounced. Track 2 holding terminal profile. That means the incoming missile is no longer searching. Its active radar seeker has turned on. It has seen the massive steel wall of the aircraft carrier. It knows exactly where it is going. The carrier's bridge remains unnaturally, terrifyingly calm. The officer of the deck barks minor helm corrections to keep the ship perfectly steady. No sharp turns, no breaking the formation. The escort ships are doing exactly what their keels were laid down to do. They will absorb the shock, they will extend the carrier's eyes, and they will kill whatever tries to punch through the shield. Inside the Combat Information Center, the defensive wall automatically shifts from the outer layer to the inner layer. Cruiser engaging, ESSM away. This time, an evolved Sea Sparrow missile launches from the port side of the formation. It flares brilliant white against the gray ocean, leaving a violently twisting trail of smoke as it vanishes into the distance. On the tactical screen, the geometry collapses again. The incoming anti-ship missile keeps coming. The American interceptor closes the gap. The two symbols merge on the glass. For half a quackanazing second, the hostile track flickers. Then the blue light solidifies. It stays alive. Missile still up. Possible partial miss. Track continuing. The air is sucked out of the room. That changes absolutely everything. The first intercept was perfectly clean. The radar proximity fuse worked, and the warhead obliterated the threat. This one did not. Whether the blast only damaged the enemy missile's fins, or the shockwave merely shoved it slightly off its flight path, the weapon is still flying. It is still moving directly toward the heart of the carrier group. And now there is vastly less room, almost zero time, and no more easy options. Time to inner layer, 38 seconds. That number hits the CIC harder than a physical klaxon. Up on the exposed flight deck, the sound of the approaching nightmare finally arrives. It is a distant tearing roar, rolling low and heavy over the water like a freight train made of thunder. Crewmen crouch instinctively behind heavy tow tractors, bomb carts, and steel jet blast deflectors. Their eyes are fixed on a horizon they still cannot fully see. They do not need to see it. The billion-dollar combat systems deep in the hull can see it for them. That is the only reason they are still breathing. High above, the Hawkeye pushes a critical update. The two high contacts that were trailing behind the missiles are suddenly separating. One drifts aggressively to the west. The other descends sharply, diving toward the ocean. This is not random behavior. This is not falling debris. This is a brilliantly coordinated attack package. They are loitering munitions. Drones designed specifically to force the American formation to split its radar attention and divide its fire at the worst possible moment. The tactical action officer does not waste syllables. Do not chase the decoys unless they commit to a terminal dive. Kill the leakers first. That is the ruthless, unbending discipline of naval air defense. You do not shoot at what looks dangerous. You shoot at what is going to kill you first. The wounded, burning sea skimmer breaks through the outer defensive screen and races directly into the inner layer. It is barely above the waterline now, flying so low it is throwing up a faint white wake of sea spray beneath its belly. Its seeker head is still stubbornly alive. Its course is still lethal. ESSM. The order is fired through the network. From the closest Arleigh Burke destroyer, another missile rips out of the vertical launch cells. It leaves the ship with less majestic drama and much more savage urgency. It is built for exactly this kind of brutal close-quarters knife fight. It cuts out low, skimming just feet above the sea, actively hunting the hostile missile in the final desperate stretch of air before impact. The two tracks rush each other in absolute silence on the digital display. Then, the screen clears. A massive echoing boom rolls across the water. Splash 2. A few shoulders in the CIC loosen, but only for a fraction of a second, because the third hostile contact is already forcing its way inside the perimeter from the starboard bow. It is flying even lower than the others. It is either programmed smarter, or the enemy is getting lucky. It stays completely buried in the surface clutter, masking itself against the waves until the destroyer on the carrier's right flank catches it late. Too late. New leaker. Bearing 051, very low, very fast, 5 miles out. The giant aircraft carrier does not maneuver. It cannot afford to swing its stern and expose a larger radar cross-section. Instead, the escorts rotate the shield around her. Electronic warfare teams scream into their headsets, flooding the starboard sector with blinding microwave noise. Nulka decoys are fired high into the air, hovering on rockets, broadcasting massive radar signatures in a desperate attempt to seduce the incoming missile away from the ships. The third missile finally appears visually. It is a hard, sleek silver needle flying over the black-blue water. It is coming in so fast and so low it seems to be slicing the ocean open. On the bridge, the captain and the deck watch stand entirely frozen, watching the inbound death through the starboard windows. At this range, there is no more room for theater. There is no more room for missiles. The enemy weapon crosses the invisible boundary into point defense range. CIWS hold. Hold, engage. The phalanx mount on the carrier's starboard sponson opens up. The sound is not a series of gunshots. It is a deafening mechanical scream, a ripping metallic buzzsaw that vibrates the teeth in your skull and drowns out human thought itself. A solid, glowing red stream of 20mm depleted uranium and tungsten tears out across the water at 4,500 rounds per minute. It looks like a laser beam made of pure violence. The automated radar tracks the bullets, tracks the missile, and walks the stream of fire directly into the incoming warhead. For one impossible, horrifying second, the inbound missile keeps coming straight through the wall of metal. Then its aerodynamic shell gives way. It bursts apart in midair. The warhead detonates sympathetically. Fragments of burning titanium and steel cartwheel violently across the surface of the water. A massive, dirty orange fireball blossoms low off the starboard quarter, so close that the shockwave slaps the steel outer hull of the carrier like a physical backhand. Shrapnel rains down, hissing and boiling as it hits the water. A thick cloud of black smoke washes over the flight deck, but the giant ship steams right through it. Untouched, unbroken. Splash 3. Nobody in the room repeats the call twice, because the battle is not over. One of the high contacts just dropped its nose sharply and accelerated. It is not a decoy anymore. The drone is committing, and it is not trying to outrun the formation. It is trying to outweight it. It is coming in late, after the interceptors have fired, after the first wave of adrenaline has peaked, after the natural, fatal human urge to take a breath and relax. That is exactly when the battle group's radar picture tightens again, and the cruiser reports something infinitely worse than a suicide drone. A brief, powerful radar spike erupts from the Iranian coastline, then another. They are painting the fleet. It is unmistakable fire control behavior. A second launch corridor is already opening up on the mainland. The first wave of missiles was dying over the water, but the next wave is already being prepped for launch. For 7 long seconds after the last explosion, the Strait of Hormuz goes strangely quiet. It is not a peaceful silence. It is not safe. It is just quiet in the way a street fight gets quiet when both sides realize the first punch didn't end it, and the second exchange is going to require absolute destruction. Burning fragments from the shattered missile drift lazily across the water. A thin black ribbon of toxic smoke hangs low over the sea. On the carrier's flight deck, not a single sailor mistakes that silence for victory. Crewmen stay low, pressed hard against the non-skid decking, hiding behind tractors and heavy chains. Their helmets are turned toward the coast. The island superstructure remains lit up with sensors. The deck remains armed. Every single eye is still working. Inside CIC, the tactical picture does not relax for a second. The 3 confirmed sea skimmers are at the bottom of the ocean. The late-arriving drone is still inbound. But the real terror is the radar spikes flashing from the jagged mountains of the Iranian coastal belt. Coastal emitters active again. The mood in the room changes. The temperature drops. The first wave was never the main effort. The first wave was just the probe. The enemy wanted to map the American defensive responses, to see how many missiles the destroyers would fire, to find the blind spots in the radar net. The real danger now is what comes after the probe. What the launch crews hiding in the mountain bunkers do with the seconds bought by the confusion of the drone attack. But the United States Navy does not waste those seconds. Above the formation, the Hawkeye tightens its orbit and pushes an impossibly dense picture down into the fleet network. The Aegis cruiser feeds back precise radar-bearing lines. The starboard destroyer contributes passive electronic intelligence detections, listening to the enemy's radio frequencies. An intelligence specialist on the carrier leans over a glowing console, his fingers flying across a keyboard as he cross-references the enemy emitter behavior against highly classified threat libraries that were loaded into the ship's brain long before she ever set sail. No one says the word trap. They do not need to. The enemy fired first. That means the rules of engagement just vanished. Every single radar sweep, every uplink, every coastal pulse bouncing off the mountains now has lethal context. The ambush gave the carrier strike group the one thing it did not have 2 minutes earlier. It gave them a live kill chain to map, correlating launch azimuth. Stand by, stand by. Then the answer appears on the master display, glowing with lethal certainty. Probable origin sector confirmed. Northern Coastal Belt, Sector Alpha 7. Multiple emitters, one long-range search radar, one fire control quality tracking source. The strike group commander on the bridge listens to the report. He does not flinch. He does not change expression. He looks out at the smoke clearing off his starboard bow, and he gives the order that will echo into history. Build the response. That order does not mean fire blindly into the dark. It means something vastly colder. It means systematic surgical eradication. On the flight deck, the yellow shirts snap back into explosive motion. The next launch cycle is no longer defensive, it is highly deliberate. An EA-18G Growler, the most advanced electronic warfare aircraft on Earth, is pulled violently forward to catapult number 1. Its wings unfold and lock into place. The massive jamming pods beneath its wings are already powered up and configured for the exact frequencies the enemy is using. Right behind the Growler, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets are brought forward to catapults 2 and 3. They are not loaded for a routine air patrol, they are loaded heavy for precision mud moving. The sleek gray jets bristle with 2,000-pound joint direct attack munitions. Their crews move incredibly fast under the eerie glow of the deck lights. They check safety pins, run through arming panels, and verify final GPS data loads with the kind of practiced, terrifying urgency that looks almost like calm from a distance. The United States aircraft carrier is not lashing out in anger, it is methodically selecting the proper tools for an amputation. Back in CIC, the trailing drone that survived the first exchange shifts even lower and starts angling hard toward the formation from the west. It is a much smaller threat than the heavy anti-ship missiles, but it is deeply dangerous for exactly that reason. It arrives late when attention is shifting to the counterattack. Drone contact committed. The cruiser picks it up first. A nearby escort destroyer instantly designates the target. A short-range engagement sequence begins automatically. There is no dramatic pause this time, there is no room for tension. Another ESSM interceptor is assigned, launched, and guided flawlessly. The digital symbol of the drone simply vanishes from the scope in a cloud of shrapnel. Splash 4. Again, no one celebrates because the real war has now moved ashore. The Growler crews are strapped tightly into their ejection seats. Their canopies lower and lock with a pneumatic hiss. White steam starts to boil and build beneath the catapult shuttles on the deck. Behind them, the Super Hornets wait, their noses kneeling low to the deck, their twin turbofan engines screaming, loaded with the high explosives that turn digital coordinates into real-world consequences. These aircraft are not launching into a peaceful, permissive sky. They are launching directly into a live surface-to-air missile corridor where enemy coastal radars have already tasted the range of the carrier group and are desperately preparing to fire another volley. The launch officer, the shooter, drops to one knee, touches the deck, and points directly off the bow. The Growler goes first. The catapult fires with earth-shattering force. The aircraft is hurled down the 300-foot deck, accelerating from 0 to 160 miles per hour in 2 seconds. It punches into the pale morning light, climbing hard and banking violently toward the threat sector on the coast. The first Super Hornet follows seconds later, the roar of its afterburners rattling the deck plates. Then the second Hornet launches. Each jet disappears into the exact same narrow, dangerous slice of sky where the enemy missiles had just come from. Inside the carrier's combat center, the entire posture of the fight shifts from desperate survival to cold-blooded hunting. The electronic warfare feed on the main screen sharpens dramatically as the airborne Growler starts working its dark magic. Miles across the coastline, the digital representation of one of the Iranian radar emitters wavers, then another. The rhythm of their sweeps changes. Their search patterns shorten and stutter. The Growler is screaming through the sky, blasting the enemy radar receivers with focused, blinding walls of electromagnetic static. The enemy operators on the ground are suddenly staring at screens filled with nothing but blinding white snow. One enemy fire control signal blinks off, stays dark for 10 seconds, and then reappears farther inland. They are repositioning. That means the enemy is using mobile missile launchers, shoot and scoot tactics. They know the Americans are coming. The strike group continues to build an airtight picture. The lead destroyer maintains a rigid missile defense posture over the fleet. The cruiser continues scanning the upper atmosphere for a high-altitude ballistic threat. A heavily armed MH-60 Seahawk helicopter is brought up to the flight deck, its rotors unfolding, preparing to launch and push out over the outer screen to hunt for surface threats hiding in the shoreline clutter. Through all of this, the mighty nuclear-powered carrier never stops moving forward. That matters more than anything. In the claustrophobic confines of the Strait of Hormuz, the ship that stops to fight is the ship that dies. Speed is life. Then a brand new nightmare appears on the surface search radar. Fast contacts. Multiple surface targets extremely close to the northern shoreline. They are not sluggish commercial tankers. They are not stationary buoys. It is a swarm of armed patrol craft and fast attack boats pushing aggressively out from a concealed harbor mouth. First 2, then 4, then 8 boats break into the open water, fanning out in a wide tactical crescent. The surface warfare officer tags them immediately. They are heavily armed Bogomars and fast inshore attack craft, likely loaded with heavy machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and possibly packed to the brim with high explosives for a suicide run. They are not actively firing yet, but their presence is no accident. The enemy commander on the shore is trying to infinitely widen the tactical problem. Missiles raining down from the mountains above, a swarm of suicide boats rushing in from the dark water below. Too many angles, too many targets. A desperate attempt to force the American captain to panic and break his formation. The strike group commander on the bridge stares at the optical feed of the approaching swarm. He does not bite on the distraction. Track them, he orders, his voice like grinding stone. Target them, but do not break the shield. Do not divert the strike package. The enemy is trying to reopen the chaos. The United States Navy is refusing to participate. Up in the sky, the first targeting quality update comes through the encrypted data link from the Air Wing, one of the Super Hornets flying deep over hostile territory, working in absolute synchronization with off-board targeting cues from the Hawkeye and passive jamming support from the Growler, has successfully locked its advanced targeting pod onto the exact radar signature that matters most. They have found the physical fire control vehicle that guided the sea skimmers. It is not a guess. It is not an estimation of a broad grid square. It is a live, high-resolution optical and thermal lock on a camouflage-netted missile battery hidden in a rocky ravine. In the CIC, the digital symbol of the enemy launcher is boxed in bright red, verified, passed up the chain of command in microseconds. On the flight deck below, sailors look up into the dark sky as the fading thunder of the departing jets echoes off the water. They cannot see the glowing consoles. They cannot see the classified target folders, but they can feel the massive ship changing its intent around them. The first 3 minutes of this war were about frantically staying alive. This exact minute is about making absolutely sure the people who started it do not live to try it again. Inside the tactical network, the final communication comes through the headsets, sharp, clipped, and brutally simple. Target quality achieved. Time on target, 15 seconds. And somewhere high over the rugged mountains of the strait, an American fighter pilot sitting in the cockpit of a $60 million strike fighter receives the single instruction the launch crews on the coast prayed they would never trigger. Cleared hot. The words are short, flat, final. Over the northern edge of the coastline, the lead Super Hornet holds perfectly steady, ignoring the radar warning receivers screaming in his helmet. He holds his course for less than a second, just long enough for the weapon release computer to register a flawless drop solution. With a heavy clunk felt through the airframe, 2,000-pound guided bombs fall away from the pylons. The aircraft immediately breaks hard off the attack line, pulling 6 Gs, and streaks back toward the ocean. There is no flourish. There is no hesitation. Beneath him, the strike package separates into their assigned roles the way only perfectly trained naval aviation can execute. one jet delivering the ordnance, one jet flying high cover to intercept enemy fighters, the Growler flying ahead of both, flooding the entire airspace with electronic suppression. Back on the massive aircraft carrier, nobody sees the bombs fall. They only see the devastating mathematical result. Inside CIC, one of the Iranian coastal emitters begins to violently jitter on the screen. Its search pattern stutters, widens in a desperate panic, and then collapses entirely into useless noise as the Growler's jamming power is focused directly onto its receiver. Another enemy radar source tries to compensate by spiking harder, transmitting brighter and more focused energy into the sky. That is exactly the fatal mistake the Americans were waiting for. Fire control source just surged. The enemy radar has essentially shined a massive flashlight into a dark room, screaming its exact location. The weapons officer on the carrier does not need a second explanation. The live tactical picture has tightened to the singular point every strike group works toward in a real engagement. Threat absolutely confirmed. Location perfectly refined. Shooter heavily armed and in position. Support assets perfectly synchronized. 30 seconds later, the first enemy target simply disappears, not gradually, all at once. The clean red symbol on the tactical display flickers, smears into static, and vanishes completely from the network. On the classified intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance video feed routed in from an overhead drone, a massive, brilliant white heat bloom punches outward from the dark coastline. It is instantly followed by a massive secondary explosion that rolls through the exact same position a moment later as the enemy's own stockpile of unlaunched anti-ship missiles cooks off in the fire. Target 1 silent. Target destroyed. No one in the combat center is foolish enough to confuse momentary silence with total destruction, but a hostile radar battery that violently stops transmitting in the middle of a massive naval engagement has either gone dead, gone totally dark in terror, or been turned into a smoking crater of glass and twisted steel. Any of those three outcomes serves the carrier group perfectly. Then the second psychological blow lands on the enemy. Another coastal emitter stationed miles farther east and inextricably tied to the same launch network begins frantically shifting its physical position. It is no longer trying to coordinate a follow-up attack. It is desperately trying to survive. Its search arcs become erratic. Its signal quality degrades. The radar pattern no longer looks like a confident, coordinated, integrated coastal defense network. It looks exactly like terrified individuals operating isolated nodes, praying they are not the next target to die. That is the absolute turning point of the battle. Only 10 minutes ago, the American strike group was absorbing the terrifying first shock of a multi-axis missile ambush inside one of the most geographically restricted, dangerous waterways on Earth. They were on the defensive, reacting to a lethal surprise. Now the entire geometry of the fight has violently reversed. The enemy is no longer dictating the tempo of the war. They are bleeding, blinding, and desperately reacting to American power. Out on the flight deck, the psychological transformation of the crew is just as visible. There is still immense tension in the air. The jet engines are still screaming. The smell of JP-5 aviation fuel, raw ocean salt, and the acrid stench of burned cordite drifting over from the escort ship still chokes the wind. But the frantic survival edge is gone. The deck crews move with the clipped, arrogant precision of men and women who know the danger is far from over, but who also know without a shadow of a doubt that their side now completely owns the clock. Aviation ordnance men in red shirts start hauling heavy carts of follow-on laser-guided munitions to the waiting jets. Recovery crews check the arresting wires, ensuring the deck is ready to catch the fighters when they return. A yellow-shirted handler signals a massive tow tractor to pull a fresh fighter onto the catapult. The mighty aircraft carrier is not hiding behind her escorts. She is not running away. She is continuing to function as a sovereign, floating American airfield, projecting absolute dominance over the sea. To starboard, the Arleigh Burke destroyer remains locked outward, an unsleeping metal guard dog. Its flat-panel spy radar panels keep sweeping relentlessly low over the waterline, hunting for anything foolish enough to try and exploit the aftermath of the airstrike. It is searching for another sea skimmer, a late-arriving drone, or a desperate fast boat making a suicide run out of the coastal clutter. The cruiser to port maintains the macro-level air picture, tracking every single atmospheric return for hundreds of miles with the cold, unblinking patience of a machine built specifically for the apocalypse. Then, the surface tactical picture begins to move again. Multiple fast contacts. Northern inshore lane. Range 8 miles and closing. Those Iranian fast patrol craft spotted earlier are now spreading out across the black water. They are not charging blindly into the teeth of the fleet's guns, but they are not retreating either. They are committing to a swarm tactic. They are testing the perimeter. Small, incredibly fast, and very hard to paint with radar against the busy, rocky shoreline, the speedboats push out just far enough to project severe physical pressure without quite crossing the invisible line into a cleanly hostile, suicidal act. In any other context, against any other navy, a swarm of 20 armed speedboats might force a ship's captain to panic. It might force him to split his attention, rotate his heavy assets, or maybe even pull his strike aircraft off the coastal bombardment mission to deal with the immediate threat in the water. Not today, not this captain. The carrier battle group has already learned the bloody lesson of the first missile wave. Do not ever let the enemy widen the problem faster than you can violently close it. Do not let them dictate the terms of the engagement. A heavily armed MH-60 Seahawk helicopter lifts heavily off the carrier's deck. It banks hard, dropping its nose, and thunders out toward the outer screen. It stays very low at first, skimming the wave tops before pitching up just high enough to bring its advanced forward-looking infrared optics and its laser designators to bear on the swarm of surface contacts rushing over the water. The helicopter does not immediately open fire. It doesn't need to. The pilot simply flips a switch, activating the targeting laser. In the cockpits of the speedboats below, the enemy drivers suddenly hear the screeching alarm of their laser warning receivers. They look up into the dark sky and realize they are already dead. They are painted, they are locked. Beneath the stub wings of the Seahawk, 4 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles are armed and waiting for a single twitch of the pilot's finger. In the door of the helicopter, a naval air crewman racks the charging handle of a GAU-2150 caliber machine gun, the heavy barrel pointed directly at the lead boat. Back on the destroyer, the automated Mark 38 25mm chain guns swivel on their mounts, tracking the boats perfectly, their stabilized barrels tracking up and down with the roll of the ocean. The message broadcast across the water is absolute and undeniable. If you cross the 5-mile line, you will cease to exist. The lead Iranian fast attack boat hesitates. The wake behind its outboard motors churns white as the driver throttles back. The swarm wavers. The sheer, overwhelming, suffocating reality of American naval power has finally broken their nerve. One by one, the fast attack boats turn their bows away from the fleet. They break formation, throttle up, and flee back toward the safety of the coastal coves, leaving nothing but fading white wakes on the dark water. In the Combat Information Center of the carrier, the tactical action officer watches the digital tracks of the speedboats retreat. He exhales a long, slow breath. The radar screens are finally clear of inbound threats. The coastal missile batteries are either burning craters or cowering in silence. The swarm has been broken. Through the blast windows of the bridge, the sun finally begins to break over the horizon of the Strait of Hormuz. The first rays of dawn catch the towering gray steel of the aircraft carrier's island. She is untouched. Her escorts flank her perfectly, their missile cell hatches still smoking, their guns still pointed outward. The strike group steams onward, cutting a massive, undefeated wake through the most dangerous waters on Earth, leaving a message written in fire and steel for anyone watching from the shore. We own this ocean.